This is the Board of Appeals, on November 2nd, 2023. Public input. Public input shall be limited to statements from the public relating to any issues with the jurisdiction of the Chelmsford Zoning Board of Appeals that are not currently on the subject of a pending public hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals. Public comment on any pending public hearing shall only be heard during such public hearings. Is there any public input this evening?
Anyone?
Seeing none. We have no administrative review. A continued public hearing is 43 Bartlett Street. Elizabeth Gabrielle is the trustee. I have a letter here from Douglas Hausler regarding the limited accessory apartment at 43 Bartlett Street. This letter requests that the hearing on the application filed on behalf of Elizabeth Gabrielle as trustee of EAG Realty Trust, the applicant, the owner of home at 43 Bartlett Street, Chelmsford, Mass., be postponed until your meeting on December 7th, 2023. The applicant has tried to retain the services of a civil engineer to assist them in the preparation of the required submittals and is actively seeking to retain an engineer for that purpose. This also serves to confirm that if the request to postpone is approved, the applicant agrees to extend the time period for the board to issue a decision for 60 days after the conclusion of the hearing to issue a decision. In advance, thank you. Sincerely, Douglas E. Hausler. So could I get a motion to continue 43 Bartlett Street?
I'll make a motion to continue 43 Bartlett Street.
Second.
Second by Steve. All in favor?
Aye.
Afterwards.
After, you think?
Second hearing.
Okay. Next hearing is 10 Cross Street and 0 Hope Street. Martha McClure, requesting a special permit under zoning bylaw section 195-82 floodplain district to redevelop a pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling into a two-family dwelling and any other relief deemed necessary. The site is located in the RM district and identified as Assessor's ID Map 4, Block 10, Lots 1 and 4, consisting of approximately .25 and .16 acres respectively. Is there someone here tonight representing?
There's another letter of request for continuation. Should be behind there.
I have a letter from Finneran Nicholson, PC, attorneys at law. Mr. Belansky and members of the board, I am writing on behalf of my client, Martha McClure, to respectfully request a continuance without discussion of the hearing scheduled for November 2nd, 2023 for the above restroom project until your hearing of December 7th, 2023. The reason for the request is we'd like to meet with the Conservation Commission to review the floodplain prior to meeting with the Zoning Board of Appeals. Please call me with any comments or questions you may have. Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter. So we have not opened the meeting. I'm sorry,
We
Douglas
opened it
Duchesne.
We opened
did.
it last month, but also continued without discussion. They want to meet with Conservation first.
Sure.
And they're scheduled for next week with Conservation.
Okay, can we ask that they put the caveat that Doug put in for the 60-day extension? Not for
Yes,
this, but in the
It's
future?
not necessary for special permit,
Oh, okay, good.
but I will
problem.
ask them to do that.
So could I get a motion to continue 10 Cross Street and 0 Hope Street?
I'll make a motion to continue 10 Cross Street and 0 Hope Street.
And a second? As directed by Steve? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Might as well keep it consistent. I got the eyebrow at the point.
It's so well on last one.
Well, I appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, we have some new business discussion items. The LAA bylaw, section 195, 6.1. We're going to discuss the pros and cons of the current bylaw, a comparison with other towns, cities, and in-law bylaws, and Massachusetts general law, whether we should or should not amend the current bylaw, and suggestions for amending the current bylaw. I think we have an overview packet that we could put up on the big screen.
I know Becky took care of me.
I do have one extra. I think you already have this in your packet from, because we discussed it like early summer, but you can take that one.
Oh, my God. Really? Was this the one where we talked about like how each town has like the smaller of the three or four surrounding towns?
Together. So
Oh,
I just
okay.
reattached it to the agenda just to refresh everyone's memory.
Okay,
In case
okay.
you hadn't printed it out or weren't quite sure which agenda it was attached to.
Okay.
But one of the things that has been brought to our attention, Evan had emailed everyone after I sent out this agenda, you may recall. He mentioned that there is a state proposal to put together some kind of accessory dwelling unit statewide mandate. But
Like
the only thing that was attached.
standard code?
Mhm. The only thing that was attached to that email was actually a Boston Globe article. So it was just an article talking about potential changes in the proposal, but nothing, I don't actually have the exact proposal that they're considering.
I think when they're presented, they're often piecemeal and changed, and so maybe that's
It was
part of
just
the reason.
very general.
No specifics in the news article?
Not
or
really.
anything?
So the objectives of our LAA was to allow the provision of a limited accessory apartment within an existing single-family dwelling for extended family members of the owner.
Wasn't Charlie part of the committee that created the current bylaws for this?
He was, and he regrets he couldn't be here tonight. He's actually out sick, but he's hoping that this conversation will be continued onto future agendas because he does want to partake in it. And he'll have some input and give us some background as to why they
The-
chose what they chose.
Do we know what the date, how long ago this particular set of bylaws, this part of the
This-
bylaws was actually put together? Like,
I was on the board when it
Yes.
did.
oh,
So-
I thought,
I was involved with it as well, yeah.
you didn't look that old, I'm
The
sorry.
bylaw was adopted in 2010, and it was it was adopted in 2001, and then was amended in 2010, it looks like.
I was
it's
part of the
been a-
amending, I didn't, I was there for
Amending,
20
yeah.
2001.
So 2001.
So it hasn't, so at least a decade.
The major problem in most towns with this is this. Let's say that you have a single-family home, and your in-laws are getting older, or your parents are getting older, and you want to, rather than sending them to a nursing home, you'd rather keep them close by and multi-generational, taking care of them and so forth. So a decision has to be made to spend X amount of money. Now, it could be, I don't know, 200,000, 300,000, unless you got a big, huge house and you have not a lot of rooms used, and you can section a section off and just buy the kitchen and
Yep.
that. But if you're gonna build, what's a typical building now, Jose? How many dollars per square foot? Just as a general rule.
150.
150? So if you are, the state's laws right
I
now,
find it a little higher, in my experience.
I was gonna say
Two.
But
two,
it's
and a quarter.
in flux.
but if you're, the state right now in their LAA guidelines suggests 900 square feet. So if you've got 900 square feet and you're talking about $200, you're talking about 180, around a couple of $100,000. Okay, so somebody has to make a decision to spend $200,000. Not chump change, so they go out and they spend $200,000. 2 years later, the people who you built it for die. All right, in a town like Chelmsford right now, your choices are knock it down, don't use it, and that's it. So in theory, you took,
You can use it, you just
You
can't
can use
use it
it.
as an in-law.
yes, but,
The space is still habitable.
right, but they die. And you don't have an in-law use for it. You've spent $200,000, might as well throw it down the drain, because you can't do anything. In a town like Westford, you can rent it out. You can sell it, a new owner can rent it out. So the problem is, the fact that you cannot do anything with it after the fact is a big deterrent on people investing the money to build these. in the first place. So the state is looking at making it a universal change, and again, I don't think it's going anywhere, because it sounds good on paper, maybe it's good for getting votes. But all you're gonna have to do is have 2 or 3 towns sue the state over the, requirements, and it's gonna go away. Dover, Newton, Brookline, they're never going to go along with this. It's not a lot different than the MBTA guidelines, where you've got to set aside a certain amount of land for the MBTA. It's kind of the state coming up with an idea to force cities and towns away from local zoning to accept this because we're making it universal. And if you don't go along with it, then, we're going to hold back money for this or that. That's really their logic. That's the stick that they carry. So if it's not going anywhere, the question is whether cities and towns should invest some time in evaluating their requirements. That's what it comes down to. I know Evan is for not doing anything now. Let's wait to see what the state does. If you were waiting for the state to do anything,
We'd all be dead.
you'll be waiting a long, long time. And every day, the Globe ran a series of 5 parts about the problems of affordable housing right now. And primarily, these units are not about rentals. They're about not low-income housing. They're about senior housing. Low-income housing is if they're charging $2,500, $2,500 a month, maybe they're charging $1,600 in low-income housing. But senior housing, you're dealing with a small percentage of whatever their income is. So you're talking $300, $400 a month, which is 30% of their gross income, which is only Social Security. So no towns are really addressing senior housing right now. There's just no way to do it. But this is a way to do it if you're forcing the towns to add these units, especially if you can do something with it after you build it and the in-laws die or the parents die, whatever the case may be. That's
Make
the
the
kicker.
in-laws eligible for rental for senior housing.
I'm sorry?
Make the in-laws eligible to be rented as senior housing.
Right, and right now it's an 8-year wait in Chelmsford.
Yeah.
So the problem is not getting any better, it's getting a lot worse. It's 8 years now, what's it gonna be 10 years from now, when all the baby boomers really start kicking in?
Have we ever taken a pulse from the town of what they feel about rental?
Not that I know of.
I mean, ultimately, right, we represent the town, right? So I guess, would there be a way for us to be able to, besides town meeting? Because I think when's the next town meeting?
Fall,
April,
no?
yeah.
In,
April,
Spring,
they just have
April,
them.
yeah.
in typically, it all falls under the same rules or ideology, not in my town. Every town says the same thing. It's a great idea,
Just not here.
not in my town. And Chelmsford is probably no different.
What you're saying is after the in-law use is done, the owner could then rent that in-law, but only for senior housing, not for open market rentals? Just-
I mean, if that's, so I don't know, like.
No,
we
but that's
have-
what you're
That's
proposing.
kind of a-
That's an idea.
That's a kind of a
That's an
compromised
idea,
position.
right? If they're, I don't know why we don't allow the rental. Why don't we allow the LAA to be rented after the in-law?
Technically, you can rent it to family members. You can't rent it as a commercial property.
Okay, so
So,
I never understood, like, if I could rent my house, right? If I move out of my home but own it, I could rent it, right?
Yep.
So if I have an in-law that's no longer being used as an in-law, why can't I rent that in-law?
the purpose of setting up the in-law was to have extended family, generational living live there,
Yep.
not to have it be a source of an investment as commercial property.
But
Because
and I
people want
used-
to
I
avoid
used
two
it for-
families within
yep.
the single family.
Part of the problem
And that's
Like
is,
because
that
of
was the
zoning, right?
town's
Right.
RB zoning.
So it is-
They can
and part of the
speak more
problem
to
is the exponential explosion of the value of homes. Right, when
that
you were
happened
gonna
without
add
the
something and it
LLAs.
was
Yeah.
$50,000, today, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I mean, that happened without that, so, I mean,
What were you gonna say, Jose?
I think we're talking about, the rental. excuse me, so I mean, you can rent it to a relative, and it is limited to two person, and also to a caretaker.
Or like
But
a
like
hot-
Jamie said, and I was talking to Evan about this because people call to the building department, hey, can I rent a room in my house? And there are no restrictions that they cannot do so. So somebody can rent, I guess after 2 bedrooms or so, it becomes a, I'm sorry,
Apartment?
yeah, one of those boarding house. So, but there are no restriction for anybody to rent a bedroom or 2 bedrooms in their own home.
There is a restriction.
There
for
is
it.
not.
There is not.
Not.
So if you choose to rent a bedroom, that would be okay.
Yeah, yeah,
But if you choose to rent an LLA, that would not be okay.
right, because the intention of the LLA is for an immediate relative, limited to 2 people, or a caretaker, limited to 750 square feet. So you have some restrictions there. I think the purpose is to avoid apartment rentals in general, people creating illegal apartments in basements or attics, which it happens common in larger cities, cities see that more often than us. But I think that's the purpose of the LLA here in town.
And I think part of it is people are doing it anyway. Let's legalize it and control it as opposed to let it just happen and people taking chances all over the place.
So Westford has incorporated.
Westwood can be detached. It doesn't have to be attached.
But it also doesn't have to be immediate family.
It doesn't have to be immediate family.
So anyone that owns a single-family property in Westford can either utilize or build a second home on that property, attached or detached,
Right.
and of course, they have to meet
Has to
the
meet
setbacks.
setbacks and all of that. That's
And-
not,
No
and
more than
they're in-
800 or 900.
900.
they're 900.
And they have septic,
They have septic,
so
all
that you would
septic.
have to, for each bedroom, and either increase the size of the septic or have a septic that's suitable for that.
They have 2 septic
Any-
systems.
Or two, yeah, there's any number of ways to accomplish that, it just,
My wife has a daughter who lives in Westford, and she has 1.5 acres. House is situated more to one side, so she has all this land on the other side. But there would have to be 2 septic systems. Westford doesn't have town water primarily, it's well water.
wells.
So you gotta,
Either
provide
two
for
wells
that.
or you have to tap off the existing well.
Right. So the question is, do you put it off entirely and you don't talk about it because the state's gonna take care of everybody? And if you're waiting for that,
Well, I
you're
certainly
also
don't
waiting
think
for
that was
Santa.
Evan's intention, and his
I think
email
we'd
even
be
said so.
proactive,
He even
obviously.
said, while we're deciphering what, I think part of how I set up the agenda was to get a feel from everyone, so everyone can voice their pros and cons of what we have existing, of what they would like to see as a change. And then eventually, you'll all have to take a vote to decide, do you want to move forward with amending the bylaw or not before it goes forward? A step back from that, throughout the past year and a half I've been here, I've noticed that there are times when we have LAA applications, that there are some vagueness to some of the parts of the bylaw. Jose's pointed out a few sections where, in the beginning of the definition, it states that the owner has to live in the main dwelling, but then towards the end of the bylaw, it does mention that it needs to be owner occupied, either the main dwelling or the accessory dwelling. So little things like that where we can,
verbiage has to be
some
corrected.
small amendments we could certainly make by April for town meeting, just in terms of clarification and adding more clarity for everyone.
Size.
I think is a good idea. Size has come up
Size.
several times. I know several of you have expressed concern with the size. Should we increase it? Should we not? So I think we can certainly start looking at that, and also the small things, but also the big things in terms of changing it in general for the town. But I know the Housing Advisory Committee is working on that as well. So it's a matter of, at some point, I think this board might want to collaborate with housing and to get a better sense of that, perhaps. I don't know.
I think that
But
the
certainly if the
problem
state's
is
moving
too
forward or
big,
not.
and the questions to be raised are too big for any one committee. I think there needs to be a separate committee with representatives of the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, Evan, the housing advisory board, and at-large, non-affiliated members of the community. To discuss it a long term, it's gonna take a long time to talk about it and try to bring something to town meeting. It's not gonna happen overnight, and you need all these various stakeholders in it, you know, to come up with some unified plan. And at the same time, the state is doing their thing, and this committee would be following up closely with the state as far as what they're doing and so forth.
We approach Paul Cohen to accomplish that, to ask him to consider putting together a ad hoc committee to
Right.
research this and come up with a plan. I mean, we can look tonight at each of the objectives and the definitions and decide if there's anything in it that we really feel this is not working for us and we should approach town meeting in the spring. But I think that Glenn has a very good idea to consider making this a broader thing, get David Hedison involved with
Right.
it, get some new ideas, maybe have a meeting or two with a state housing rep. I don't quite know who that would be, but
And then I would propose finding a way to do some data collection from the community. How do we, do we propose a 5 or 6 questionnaire that we, send out to the community to try and get some feedback from them? I mean, we may not get a lot of responses, but for those that really it impacts, or some kind of feedback from the community that we can compile, plus our own. I mean, we've all seen enough LLA applications. We can bring in what's the common trends we've seen. Size, who can occupy, like I know between size and then actually who can occupy the LLA. First, it's been 2 people. We've had an application about, well, they're gonna stay in the big house, but me and my baby, my daughter and her baby are gonna stay in the LLA for now, and then we'll switch it later or something like that.
I don't think we
occur.
ever had a problem with that. I think it's the verbiage in it that makes it
So,
debatable, but we
We,
should
we
clarify
had,
that.
we had a case where someone was living in a certain section of town, and they happened to have kind of a double-sized lot as opposed to all their neighbors, and they wanted to, and it was on 2 different streets, back to back, and they wanted to build a unit for them on the secondary street. And it was turned down because it would be a
2 separate structures on
Right.
one lot.
Right, and so there's a lot of questions. Two town meetings ago, a presentation was made by committees studying aging, and they wanted to make Chelmsford an age-friendly community. And they touched on numerous points, but housing was a minor point of the whole thing. They really didn't get into housing. They got into many things to make it senior-friendly, but housing was not one of the topics that they spent a lot of time on. So that committee would also be involved, would want to be involved. So there's a lot of stakeholders. There was presentations made at town meeting about how, I think it was, Chelmsford was approaching 30% seniors or more as far as the whole population of the town. And again, they represent a strong voice. In fact, I think it was going to be 50% at one point,
Are there
as
any
far as
other,
the population in Chelmsford as a whole.
are there other committees currently discussing this issue that you know of?
The Housing Advisory Board is.
What are they,
Yeah.
do you know what they're discussing exactly?
Glenn's on it, I believe.
My wife is on that committee.
What exactly is it that they're?
Same thing we're talking about here.
Okay.
Now, from a financial standpoint, I would think it's a win-win for the town because everything would now be increased in value and therefore they'd be collecting more taxes. The question is then, when you talk about increasing taxes, it's like if someone comes to the town and says, I want to build a 400-unit complex. One of the first questions out of everybody's mouth is, oh, they're going to be taxing the school system, we're going to have all these extra kids. And all the statistics say if you have 1 and 2 bedrooms, you get virtually no kids. But the first argument is you're going to build all these apartments, you're going to have kids. Well, you build all these accessory apartments, you're not adding kids. You're
Well, the
just
other-
adding whole
Today,
people.
you're not.
Yeah.
But if there is a
Yep.
shift in the population or
My folks
People
are in the
start
kid
having
block, and
children.
there are kids in there. They're
There's
in-
not a lot of kids compared to single-family homes.
Here's the other question, and maybe Jose can answer. Would this impact the zoning, like RB is single family? Like, how would this work if we're doing, are they no longer gonna be LAAs? Like, are we gonna change to dual,
Well,
multifamily? I mean, it's things to consider, I don't know, like, if we go
if
turning
we'll,
this into.
if we'll impact what? I'm sorry?
So like the zoning, right?
Yeah.
So we have sections of town where it can only be single family, and it can, certain sections can be multifamily.
Right, so as it stands right now, the LLA is just for single-family home regardless of where the district is.
Because it's for immediate family.
Right.
Right.
And
But if we open it up, if it was proposed to be opened up to turn into rental property for any aspect of the population, would that be changing zoning as a whole, then RB would turn into multifamily?
well, it all depends, because if it still be considered an LLA, the only thing, like if it's agreed upon just to change the rental aspect of it, I personally don't think that it will impact the neighborhood, because the house will still be considered a single-family home. Just because now the person has the right to rent, it doesn't make it a two-family home.
How would that, what would distinguish that between that and another?
Yeah, because I think that,
From a layman's perspective, if I'm someone coming off the street and see two different units, what would distinguish that from, I mean, how would we articulate that in a way that we could?
Probably
Well,
only the size.
one
right?
of the-
'Cause The size of the
Size.
secondary place.
right,
Okay.
The standard two-family, you could have both sections being 1,500 square feet, not one 2,200 and one 750 or whatever.
Okay.
But the whole question is like a tree. We got the trunk here, all right, but as you keep going up, the questions
Oh, yeah.
keep branching out. And that's why it really needs a separate, I think it needs a separate group with a representation from various groups to come up with some unified conclusion.
I don't disagree with you. I do have concerns, though, that this, I think it's an issue based on what we've seen that does need to be updated. It's been over a decade. The formation of families in the face of this town has changed. I would just hate to see this take 2 freaking years. I'd hate this committee after committee, meeting,
Oh, I think it's
talk,
gonna take a
talk,
lot
talk,
longer
talk,
than
talk.
2 years. It's in a
You know?
process, I think.
Yeah.
I-
It's a big change. Like I said, if I own, and I personally don't feel this way, but if I have bought in an R1 district, I expect they're all gonna be single-family homes. When I do that, I have the understanding that an LLA may come into a single-family neighborhood. But to have rental property show up, and then to have, like, I hit retirement age and I say, not only am I gonna rent that unit out, but I'm gonna rent my house out, and I'm just gonna get an income from this property, and I'm gonna go to Florida. So now all of a sudden, this, in this R1 district or RA district, there's a two-family house that doesn't even have, it has tenants. It doesn't even have which you can rent in an RA district now. You can rent your home.
Yeah.
But now you're renting two homes. So it's,
The state.
discussion is important,
The
I
state has done things that have universally affected the housing market. One of the Globe articles that focused on a family who were living in Milton. And back when the great-great-grandparents bought a two-family in Milton, and it traced them down through the generations of who lived in the second apartment, who lived in the first apartment, who lived in the second. And there were many generations of the family who did that. But the article also touched on that the state enacted something which affected three families. That in Boston, the typical structure that people were putting up were three families. And it's proliferated everywhere. But then the state passed something, and it didn't say it was against three families, but it there was some language which curtailed it, and after that, they never built a three-family again anywhere. So, the state does have precedent to pass things that do affect everywhere.
Right, right.
But, I think in today's world, city or town, you're gonna have, towns that, not here. Just like the MBTA rules, there are towns that are considering, filing suit against the state because they don't wanna go along.
All right. I can appreciate it. So why don't we at least make a motion and have a vote whether we should approach Paul Cohen and ask him to consider putting together a committee to consider the LLA in town, whether it needs revamping or it needs to be adjusted, or whether, in fact, we should rent them after someone has, what does the town want? And we can get, I think Paul would be a good help.
Do we agree that they at
of the
least,
Planning board.
even if we don't do a bylaws, even if it's not even just rental, just even the size and stuff would need to be changed?
I think we'd be better off asking each of the stakeholder committees whether they feel it's necessary, and then taking that all to Paul, and rather than having Paul just make a summary judgment without having any feeling for what all the
So
committees
you
think.
would talk to planning board
Yep,
and the,
Housing Advisory, David Hedison and his group. And it's possible that a warrant article is put together just for town meeting to talk about the issue at town meeting, and for town meeting members to vote on whether they think there should be a committee set up to study this whole issue.
so we'd like to work at getting this as a proposal to town meeting to
To discuss
decide.
it, to weigh in on it, because it affects the whole town.
I agree. I just, I'm not sure how to get these people coordinated.
Are there complaints now about what's in place? That's the million-dollar question, right?
Well, the main concern that people bring to our attention is really the size.
Yep.
People
Size?
think, the area,
So is that
the
something
design
that we could put forth quickly?
I'm guessing it's not big enough.
is
for
not
most-
big enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Well,
why.
for the person building.
Right.
For the neighbors, I often get I've gotten several calls, not a lot, but several, where when something's being built, it's
They
my-
question the size.
And if it was, and those that have, a couple have been built by right, they're questioning whether a homeowner is turning their single-family home into a two-family, and they don't want two families in their neighborhood because that's not what they signed up for. So there is a lot of that feeling in town.
Yeah.
So
so
once
much
something is going to town meeting, I think that it really has to be well tailored already and explained, because I think the initial reaction will be folks in single-family zones do not want two families in their zone.
I think if we ask town meeting to put a committee together, they won't, because it'll get squashed right there.
Yeah.
Well,
Is it-
town meeting
That's
has,
hypothetical.
town meeting has a
It's the
lot of
process we
seniors.
have to use.
As part of town meeting members, a lot of them are seniors. And the question is this, all right, so you're 35 years old, and you've got a good job, and you got 2 cars, and you're sending your kids to school, and you've bought a home in Chelmsford, and you don't want this, not in my town. Okay, now you get to be 65, 30 years later, and you say, well, I've been able to save money, I got Social Security, and I got an IRA. 30 years from now, what is a typical house in Chelmsford gonna sell for? 1 point whatever million? All right, so your parents, or if your kids get into problems and you need to take care of them somehow, you're not gonna have enough money to do that. The logical thing is that you have a separate unit that they can go into, and so they're nearby and you can support them, whether you're babysitting their kids who, come home from school early, but you're right there to do that kind of thing. So there are all kind of issues related to it, and that's why you need everybody's perspective on what it is, because the first reaction is always, I don't want 2 families. And is this really considered a 2-family in the true sense of what a 2-family is?
Well, if you start renting
Not
it,
as an
yes,
LLA,
it
as it
changes
exists
neighborhood.
now.
When it crosses on and you start renting it, I think it
You
is.
change
That's when it
neighborhoods.
Even if it's
Change
$750 compared to $2,200 or $3,000, it's still, I believe, when you start renting it, gonna be considered a two-family home.
And then if you do open it up, okay, you're saying, well, the property value will go up. Not necessarily. If you get it, if you go from town to town and community to community, look at Wellesley, look at Carlisle, look at all those towns, 2-acre minimum lots.
Concord is one of the foremost towns in the state, which is favorable to LAAs.
That's great, but I'm just going by, there's 2-acre minimum builds in all these towns now. Unless you're doing something, you're putting in a bike path or whatever.
And there's a company that specializes in building these, and they're going bonkers in terms of business.
Oh, all over the country, they're doing
Yeah.
rental communities. That's a big thing now. You just rent the house, you don't buy it. It's a
No,
big
these
thing
are
in
building
Texas and places
LAAs.
like that. My sister does all the marketing
Yeah,
for it.
because it's such a
so
need.
Yeah.
So there's a niche for that right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And they go in and they work with the planning department, they do the septic system design, they do all of that, they build units to
These
the
are
latest
communities.
standards.
Typically. Is that a community? Is that what you're saying?
No,
No
they,
builders.
they just work with homeowners to build these units. That's what their focus is. They started in Massachusetts. They're doing a lot of business in Maine. They're doing a lot of business in Massachusetts. On their website, they have many of the LAA rules for all cities and towns, many cities and towns. Every time they put a unit in, they get the LAA rules and they put them on their website. But it's getting to be a big business. And it just needs to be controlled. And if towns have to change, then they have to change. Because there's no place, where are you going to send them all? To nursing homes? All nursing homes are shutting down. You're closing them left and right. So where are they going to go? On the street?
I think the LLA as they are right now, for example, Section 195, 6.1, D 3 and 4. I don't know if you want to read it, but so when somebody sells the property with an LLA, they should inform the building commissioner. But I get a lot of calls, sometimes, especially from realtors. And one of the concern is that previous to the person selling that house with that LLA, that it was prior sold by the previous owner, and it was never notified to the building department. So, and again, we get calls from people concerned that somebody's renting the apartment. So I think that so whether we increase the size area or not, if people don't inform, every time there is a change in custody from the apartment, and if they don't inform us, it's no way to keep track of what's taking place at that address.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that one thing to really consider is to probably increase the size of the design area from 750 to probably 900. And just, I don't know, I think, I read the bylaws and I think it's pretty useful. I think it served the purpose because the idea is to prevent rental, conversions to two families. And again, I get calls, and sometimes I don't want to throw a number there, but I get a lot of calls about, they renting, they depending, So I do get a lot of calls regarding people renting.
Abandoned, if you
Yeah,
will,
yeah.
LLAs, and what the future for them is.
That's what I was saying. I know there's a bigger issue to address here, but I was thinking on a narrower scope, addressing some of the more immediate concerns of LLAs, if we could do that, and then get the committee to address the more larger issues of the LLA. It's like some of the immediate issues we've seen, like size, if that's something we could address in a more expeditious manner, and then get the committee together to address the more larger issues. I don't know if that is an option.
Would it go to a town vote? Put it on a ballot?
Everything goes to
Yep.
town meeting.
Town warrants.
There's no town ballot,
Except for
though I
just-
suppose you could put a question on the ballot. I don't know how that works.
You know, it really needs to go to town meeting.
Change a bylaw.
And then
Town meeting.
someone goes through and explains all the tenets of it. Brian's gonna volunteer for that? I don't think
I would
so.
explain it as best I can.
This is so well.
And then the town meeting, you know, has people come up and they talk pro and con against it, and then they'll vote either pro or con against it.
That's a select
typical.
group of people. That's not encompassing the whole town. I mean, you have
Well,
neighborhoods and
those people
neighborhoods.
are elected to be representative of the town in general.
For their district.
They usually, and I'm a town meeting member and
There's
have
an
been
apathy there, that's
Yeah.
all.
for a long time, they usually get it right, I would say, as far as I can see. It usually gets a lot of people talking. Some things are very controversial, some things are just easy
Makes
put
sense,
through.
let's do it, yeah.
Obviously, one like this will be a lot of discussion. But it comes down to, not in my town. That's really the basic, that people bought X and I like it the way it is. You know, right now, how their feelings are gonna be 30, 35 years from now might be entirely different.
I
But-
thought it was interesting that you thought that seniors were gonna go from 30% of the town's population to 50% of the town's population. So were that to happen, I would think that, you know, a change like this would be welcomed by seniors, but I don't know. I mean, it's all,
That seems like that'd be
And,
kinda
and,
interesting.
and the population changes. I live in Williamsburg,
And I'm sorry,
and there was a time, not long ago, that virtually no families were moving into Williamsburg. It was primarily couples, young couples starting out, or it would be divorced people who are limited in money. And in the last 2 years, it's all families, the kids. The kid population has grown up dramatically, and the number of walkers who are young people has grown exponentially. Because what else you can afford in Chelmsford?
you get hit pretty bad last night?
I'm sorry?
You get hit pretty bad
Yeah,
last night?
400, as usual.
That was like the old days. That's unbelievable.
That's what we had.
Yeah,
Well, send them over.
we had one.
We had one, yeah, very quiet area. Oh.
There you go. Thanks, Jose.
So,
So it's a big issue.
well, I'm in complete agreement. I think we should probably make a motion and vote on approaching these committees, asking them to consider joining a group, and I'm a big fan of.
Could we
having-
increase the size of the unit before we go down that road, that
The-
long, long
The
road?
only way we can do that
Yeah.
is to, one, take a vote on it, and
Yeah.
then put a proposal together and have
But
town meeting
individually
vote
of
on
the
it.
bigger picture. Yeah.
We can do that. Do we want to have a straw poll and say who's in favor of a 900-foot LLA? Is that something that everyone is in favor of at this point?
Or who's in favor of at least increasing the size?
Increasing the size, yeah.
Am I in favor of increasing or taking a poll?
But
Well,
this
so
would,
it's not a vote, we're a straw
A
poll.
straw poll.
this would still have to go to town meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it should be
But
increased.
It's immaterial. I just want to know, as a board, we're going to approach town meeting, and we even have, the votes to do that. And Steve, I don't know is, that's, I guess, part of the reason I'm bringing this up.
So, I mean,
You getting past this poker face that quickly?
do we agree?
900 is too much, so.
I mean, do we agree we have two separate opportunities here?
Yes.
One to correct some immediate concerns in a small, and then
And that's the point I
develop
was trying
something
to
on a
make.
larger scale.
Right.
You know, I think
Discuss, that I was
that
trying to encourage. 'Cause
maybe one of the things that we propose is that someone here, or who's not here, gets authorized to go to other committees in town, tell them what we're thinking of, and are they thinking about the same things, and how would they feel about what should be done going forward to try to come to
Facilitate
some
that or
solution
enact
for
some
everyone.
change.
Whether they feel that a new committee is required, whatever, and then come back and, explain, the feelings of other committees.
I guess I'll jump out and throw some things out here that I'm thinking, just out on the table.
Go ahead, Steve.
Um,
Jump.
Number one, going to other committees. I'm not really feeling great about that because I don't think they're all going to represent the town. I think you're going to get 25 people who have their opinions based on their background, their circumstances, their points of view, and they will run ahead with things, and you might be representing 20% of the town or maybe 70% of the town, but how do we know if we just go, like, if the 7 of us solve this problem, are we really solving the problem for the town or what we think the problem for the town is? Going to the increasing in the size, what's the basis for what we're gonna do? Because everybody's gonna say bigger is better, who's putting the thing in, if they have the room for it, because, hey, mom and dad can spread out, but my personal, my 2 parents moved into Arlington, and they lived in a 625 square foot apartment. And they came from a 3-bedroom house, and they had to downsize like crazy, and they made it work. If you're putting that in a house that your family's also attached to, you don't have to survive everything that you need in your 900 or 800 or
You're not
whatever.
in that cubicle.
Yeah.
You're in a.
You
yeah.
can, you can spend Thanksgiving out in the main house. You can have your grocery overflow stored in their pantry. It's not, I have 750 square feet. So again, I don't just want to increase it just because some people go, well, I need more space because I can't, how can I host Thanksgiving in this little space? Just,
But that philosophy is the same as people who lived in 24 by 42 foot ranches, and now they have to have 3,000, 4,000 square foot homes. It's the same logic. In your case, you're looking at it from your personal experience of it. Other people will look at theirs, but having the widest possible amount of people who are looking at it would more guarantee that it's a more ecumenical
Right, 'cause you
answer.
don't have to build
I think that's just.
750
that's what I'm
feet,
saying.
Or 900 or 1,200. You don't have to build that. You can build to your needs. Will people build as big as they can?
But they can
And
build-
eventually, all you're gonna need is
Tell you,
a
cost is
2
gonna be
by
a
2
factor.
by
Yeah, well,
7
that's what I
foot.
was just
You're
gonna say.
gonna see some increases that we haven't even touched on yet. I mean,
And people can still
Things are
build
good.
bigger with a waiver from the board, right?
We can make it right now as big as needs be with a waiver. That's in the bylaws very clearly. We can waive any requirement, the 1 through 8, we can waive entirely. So we're not really held to that.
So increasing the size to 900 square feet, I don't think it will, my personal opinion, I don't think it will affect anything, because the board still has the power to do that.
We have it already,
We
right.
have it already.
Well, then it also becomes personal affordability. You know, if the family can afford to build the 900 square foot and their parents want to live in a little more room, well, who are we to say no? You know what I
I
mean? That's
personally
the
think
thing that I don't
750 is
like.
plenty for one.
More likely,
750 for 2, and especially with an elderly couple that don't share a bedroom anymore because, one snores or whatever the deal is, it would get
That
really hard to fit 750 and then have
So
a quality of
somebody-
life that you've worked your whole life to get.
Right.
Somebody with impediments, somebody on a wheelchair.
Yeah, I
We
think
need
there's
more
always
space for
reasons
that.
to make
And thing
the
too is,
exception,
just
but it's,
because we set a new size limit, doesn't mean they have to build to that limit. It
Right.
just is setting it up so, because we've had quite a few come up asking for more space, but we could prevent that need to ask if we put that up. But there's plenty that build below, because they don't need that extra space, so it's not.
then that would
We had
expand
one,
to every rule
we
that we
had one
have,
that
right?
was,
Everything has a limit, and you
but we
don't,
can change it.
you could triple the size of your house if you can afford it, but we say, no, you can't. You can't go 6x your floor area ratio just because you hit the lottery.
Charlie's not here to speak to this, but I'm curious why years ago they did choose the 750, and I'm curious if part of the reason might be that Chelmsford, in the 60s and 70s, built lots of small ranch and cape houses that were about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet.
Yes.
And so the point of the accessory apartment is to be subordinate in size. So if you have 1,100 square feet, like my ranch used to be, and you put a 900 square foot addition, you look like you just doubled your square footage. Now, granted, zoning and setbacks, you're gonna be limited as to how much of that you can do. But I'm wondering if that might be part of the rationale behind why they chose 750.
what I heard was
to
they
keep it
chose
smaller.
that because they didn't know what it should be, and they just went along with Billerica.
So I'm going to disagree because I was there, and I do remember the conversation. And Billerica was able to have more, and Billerica had just enacted a change because people were putting up 1,400 square foot in-laws, and that at the time was a problem that we were aware of. So we set the 750, but it wasn't based on any science. I mean, we thought 750 sounded right, and that's what we did. I remember it. I mean, it's not, it wasn't, and Charlie may have a very different opinion of it, but my thing was, Billerica was getting hit with much larger ones than they thought was acceptable. We saw that as a potential problem, and we set it at 750, honestly, almost arbitrarily. I think we looked at several towns and decided, I think that Billerica ended up at 900, if
And,
I'm
you know,
not mistaken.
Chelmsford and Billerica and Tewksbury were all towns that started out with quarter acres. All the houses had quarter acres. And then they expanded to bigger, then they were half acres.
Yeah.
Then they were three-quarter acres. Then they
All
were
the farms,
a
was
full
all
acres.
half, in the 60s, that was all of them.
And, it's just was it just to satisfy people wanted bigger houses? So the floor area ratio had to change because if you're building a 3,000
I
square
honestly
foot
think
house,
that's what was
you need a
selling.
bigger lot. And it was
Right.
really
Right
driven
then.
by the size of the house more than anything else.
Sure.
I mean, if you
Historic
try
colonial,
to
the
build
two-car garage.
today, we limit you to an acre on a new lot, but if you tore down on a half-acre lot, you're gonna fill, my experience is, you're gonna fill that lot with as much house as you can put in it,
Lexington.
because that's what sells. And that's the end of the day, the builder is gonna build what he knows he can move, what the product's gonna sell. Of course, he wants to make his money, but he's not gonna sell something that people aren't gonna want. They're not interested in it, so he's gonna sell what he feels is the best product for his market. It's not I think there's some restrictions the town has, but basically in Lexington, if you tear down a house, they survey it and they decide what's the setbacks everywhere, and that is how big that house is. As far as the setbacks will allow it to be is very common in Lexington. It's not universal, but it's very common.
They go up.
Oh, 2+. Yeah, they go up as high as they can.
Yeah.
3 stories with a basement, yeah. And make it big. So, circling back, we don't get too lost, are we going to consider increasing that, or are we gonna understand that we have the waivers to do that if need be? If someone comes with a plan and says, I'd like it bigger, and we can issue a waiver, we can consider that, or, I don't know what everyone's thinking.
I have concerns on increasing it because I feel like it's more likely to be used improperly or not allowed, and we just don't find out if it's bigger.
After the fact.
Yeah, so if it's set at that original 750, it's more likely to be used for its intended purposes.
We had one come before us that they said it was 900, but you kept looking at the plan, and you kept saying, how can this be 900? And then they came and she kept adding, and it ended up like 1,400.
Originally, we required an architect's stamp for the square footage, and it got to be an expensive proposition for the applicant, and we waived it. But that was the original, and I don't even know if somewhere in here it's still there, but that was the original deal. We were requiring an architect to tell us how big it was without the stairs,
And egress.
entryway,
Common areas or whatever.
and common areas, right. And that's how a lot of people got around it. The common areas were just an open space between both units, and that's perfectly legal to do and then perfectly acceptable. And if the in-laws chose to use it, or the outlaws, or whatever you want to refer to them as, it was open space. But if, everyone knew who was going to use it, it was set up as such. Whether that was their living room or, a family room. I know of one, they called it Switzerland. It was neutral territory.
I was in one where they had joined with a pair of 3-foot opening doors, and that opened up to a large dining room. So when the LAA people needed more space, they just opened those doors, and now they added, a huge dining room to it. And the question is, should it be codified so that there's a standard? Or should we just look at everything as every one of them stands on its own merits, or whatever they can sell us on? And the person who's most difficult is the building inspector, who has to look at all these and see if it fits in to our, changes or acceptance for every one of these. It's difficult.
Once they're built, it becomes phase two, because if people do leave them, they pass or move or whatever, the space still exists, and Jose doesn't have the right to go in the house, I mean, if you tell him he can't go in, he can't go in. There's no, there's no, you don't know what's going on in there, so.
And
It's
I-
somewhat,
It's hard to control, because I've seen one of the LLAs we approved, I've seen it advertised for rent on a Chelmsford Facebook page.
It's hard to track.
Yep.
and even if you were aware of that, and
It becomes a legal matter, requesting entry and documenting. One address can take me weeks before I can have full documentation of what's
if you
going-
can get enough.
If I can get enough. So it becomes a lot of time consuming to monitor the situation. Excuse me.
Job in itself.
And again, in many cases, it comes down to the fact that we don't want it not here, all right? And that's the way they are until they have a son who, let's say, gets ALS and needs some place to be, then their attitude changes on that.
Certainly, certainly. Well, made a very big circle here. So, back to the straw poll, do we feel it's a good idea to increase it? If I was to say on a hypothetical vote, would you think increasing it is a good idea? What?
The question is, do we have, right now it's at 750?
Yes, sir.
Do we have the right to allow it to go to 900? We have the right
The right
in a
to
little bit.
Continue on forever.
Well,
It's
doesn't
a
the
board
state max
decision.
it out at 900? Isn't that what you found online when we
Yeah.
were looking at accessory?
Yes.
So it's maxed out at
The
900
state.
by state law.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I think that's what
The
was in
state
the
is
information I
900.
read, yeah.
So we allow 750, but then we can do a waiver up
So
to
the last
900.
page. That's general law.
Yeah, because ours says, our bylaws says that we can be a special permit, we're allowed to issue special permits for, waive deviation from any of the design standards in subsection D, which D2 includes area limitations of the max 700 square feet. So we can issue a waiver, a special permit, or a waiver for that 750. Up to, I guess, the state standard of 900.
I think if you increase it to
But if you change it
900,
to 900, nobody's coming in with less than 900.
Yeah, well,
And then they're going to be looking for
could.
a waiver.
well, increase
you
it
can't get a waiver
Well, you
past
can't at that
900.
increase it to
But it
900
doesn't
and then
really
We
matter that
can't
much.
waive past 900.
I'm not sure that would hold up, but we can assume that's the case.
I just want to circle everyone back to the straw poll, because we keep,
Do you feel, so
Deviating.
your response was, I mean, do you feel that we can live with the waiver and not increase the 750 to 900?
If it were public knowledge, but, how many people in town would know that? If we just said, that we go up to 900, who in town's going to know that?
Well, I
All
guess
the
if
people
they
who have lawyers.
apply, if they,
I
I think most
then
people
if they,
know it's 750.
Becky would certainly be
yeah, Becky would tell
able
them
to
when they
answer
apply.
their questions.
Yeah.
Honestly, most of the people that do the LLAs come in with an attorney, and most of the attorneys are repeat.
I would guess that if, I would change it to 900.
All right.
But I would guess that you might have people in the, if we did that, there might be people in the audience eventually who say, I don't agree with this. Why did you do this?
Well, of
And
course.
They're
No one's
there.
gonna
There's
agree with
always got to
everything.
be,
So, and
okay,
the,
what's your opinion of it?
I don't have a problem going to 900. If the state state allows it, why couldn't we allow that, up to 900?
Okay.
And like she said with size, the law says 900 or half the square foot, whichever is smaller. So if it's an 1,100 square foot ranch, they can't do
That would be
900.
550.
It'd only be 550. It's or half the area of its principal dwelling.
I have not had a chance to read it.
If we want to apply the state requirement, right, if you, the
But
verbiage was
there's
exactly by the state.
there's no forcing anyone to live with that rule right now.
No.
And when Westford, when Westford did, when Westford did their
I mean,
new
we've seen
update,
small
And they have
properties.
they
Big lots in
purposely
Westford.
did not include that specific part of it, because if you had a house that was 400,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet in Westford, and you live by that rule, you would have LAAs of 2,000.
It
So
says
it's
whatever
whichever
is
is less.
smaller.
Smaller, 900 or
Half
smaller.
or 900 square feet,
So they
whatever is
max it.
smaller. So the max is still 900 if you had a 4,000 square foot house. You could only do 900.
Straw
It still
poll,
made it
straw poll, straw poll.
You like decisions, don't you?
I think based on the trend, I think increasing the size, yes. Do we need to go to 900? If we want to make sure we're still keeping the town, keeping everyone, in control of the size, I don't think we need to put out 900. Yes, we know we have the authority to waive to 900. If we have someone coming in, they want to do handicap accessible, they're wheelchair bound, every doorway's got to be so big, whatever. And we
Bathrooms
have
to be
that.
expanded.
Right, they can come up with that proposal, and we have that in our pocket for those special cases. But based on our surrounding communities, if we want to be comparable with the communities and be attractive for our I'm looking long-term communities, residents, populations, right? We got 800, 900 surrounding communities. If we increase to 800, 850, or just 800, just look like we're to become comparable to other properties and looking attractive to our current community members and future possible community members.
A lot of it too is guided by the.
So is that a yes or a no?
I said
Increases
Yes.
to 800.
Increase to 8.
Slowest straw
Increase to
poll
8.
ever. 50 feet to it.
Yeah,
Okay.
You want to increase to 8, okay, so I'm gonna.
I would
move
even
you
go 8
over.
and a quarter. I would do 8 and a
We're
quarter.
gonna.
Twist her arm to
I'll do 8 and a quarter. I mean,
8,
800,
6, 3
okay.
and 2/4 inches.
Because at first I thought it was use the
Your opinion,
waiver.
I know you
not
kinda touched
I
on it.
agree with Jamie's rationale, but I would stick to 800.
Yeah, 8.
800?
Yeah, I'll do 800.
I won't give him that quarter.
Okay, hey, I'll stick to 8.
Okay.
I'm sticking with 750. They all have to come here anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're here and we want to give them 9,000, we can give them 9,000.
900.
900, sorry.
Can I have your budget?
So if they have to come here, no matter what, whether we say it's 750, 850, 900, 8 and a quarter, keep the thing with 750, and then the people who have 2 wheelchairs and a walker and whatever, we
Right.
say, yes, you get the 900 because you're here and we can do it.
So you're saying use the waiver?
Yes.
Allow, okay.
I think the use of the waiver is the correct way too, and I would leave it at 750, because we have this right, we've done it that way for this very reason. By going to 900, we really don't change anything, it's just a process. We don't grant them any more than we would allow now,
I just think
with the surprise that we are actually held to 900. I did not understand that.
I think my other rationale too is that we're allowing them the knowledge to know for standard of living. They have that extra, for me, about 50 square feet for me, right? The 750, we're saying, and you're limited to that for standard of living. For people, like we've said, have worked hard their whole life. Yes, they have to downsize, but, some are going to downsize purely by budget, but having 800 square feet as opposed to 750, it can be a pretty comparable size when you have to downsize to begin with. So for a standard of living concept, when you've worked hard your whole life, we're setting a limit for these people. Yeah, but you're right, a lot of people aren't gonna know about the waiver. They're gonna see my limit is 750. I wouldn't have known about it if I hadn't read it myself either, so.
They're going to come in and they're going to talk to Becky and she can go,
Did
yes,
you
it's
know?
750, but the board has the opportunity to increase that if you can make a case for it. So there's an opportunity for them to all to find out, because they have to come in to talk to
If
someone.
I come in and say I want 800 because I want my standard of living to be somewhat comparable, because I want 800
You can come in and you can say that, then it's up to the board
You
to.
could be a senior and say that, look, I need 2 bedrooms because my husband snores so bad, I cannot be in the same room with them,
I'm just saying.
all right? And,
Standard of living.
and
Why
I
not to
still,
make a
I
case for
still,
50 more
I
square
still work part-time and work out of my home, and I need a small home office to work quietly in. And now you're growing space legitimately.
And you can come in with that request, and the waiver is very valid to utilize.
And at the same time, you
Yeah,
have the
just
state
we're asking
doing
people to
whatever behind the
justify-
scenes.
The need for quality of life.
Right, so I guess I would ask if that's the case,
You know,
because
thought
I
it was
don't want to
interesting.
guide anyone to just say blanket, oh, but you can ask for a waiver and get 900, because then that's too kind of just open-ended.
Right.
What will appease all of you to vote in favor of that? Is it a justification, like an extra bedroom, or an office space, or just in general, if anybody asks, they can get it?
As a Board of Appeals, that's what we have to do, is
So
make that
usually you
decision.
justify something, so in terms of just guiding folks, because like right now, for variances, I will let them know, if you do not have an actual legal hardship, you probably don't want to apply. Because it costs the average person $1,000 to come here and speak to all of you. So it's not worth it to them to spend $1,000, it wouldn't be for me either,
So-
and just to get a no, when I know the answer's gonna
So
be no,
would you
based
be-
on there is no hardship.
So would you be asking them to prove that their wife snores?
No,
No, but
what
they're
I'm,
gonna get
what
it.
I'm
Because
asking
everyone's gonna
for
come in and
is-
say, I need 2 bedrooms because my wife or my husband snores.
They
They'll
would
get
have 2 bedrooms,
the
too.
limit.
Be on the plan as 2.
Do you understand what I mean? Like, is it just a
Yeah,
blanket, or
it's just
should
whether they're
be
gonna
like?
get that additional amount,
Right,
so
right.
it's, okay, well, maybe I have to
Yeah,
change
yeah,
my
I know.
plans.
I don't want you to give everyone the
bedrooms is
formula
not
for how to
enough,
get the
right?
Well,
answer
that's
like you
just
said.
it, yes,
2 people is the maximum in an LLA.
yes.
Right.
So
But
2
2
bedrooms would be the
bedrooms
max.
doesn't make an LLA. Right. People can have 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms. They can add as many bedrooms as they want, right?
As long as they're not exceeding
Right.
the 750 slash whatever. I thought it was interesting, you can't add separate meters.
Right.
Correct.
So that's a positive,
And sewer, right, yeah.
if you're renting it out, you're gonna be paying that person's electric, water, sewer, gas, because you cannot get separate utilities. So
Right.
it's a strong indicator that it may not be a 2-family.
Right.
Not everything, but it's,
People would always find a way to go around that. We had a
Well,
situation
you increase
here,
the rent.
one of the applicants who came,
well, no, certainly you increase the rent to include utilities, but
How did they get around? Yeah, I'm listening too.
yeah, that's how they kind of put a meter in the other structure, and by the time
Oh,
you
they
knew,
just put a meter in?
nobody knew, and two
National
apartments
Grid's not
popped
gonna
up.
ask questions, right?
Yeah.
National Grid won't ask questions, they just do it.
Okay, well, thought it was interesting, but maybe not as effective as I would have thought. So, we're not going to go to the town meeting and ask for an increase in size. Is that the flavor of the board?
Yes, so.
We're still gonna pursue housing, David Hedison, planning board, and talk about some sort of group to look at revamping the whole thing.
I mean, do you want
In
to
which-
poll on that opinion?
I don't
Oh,
know if
not
I-
another straw
What if I
poll.
know?
We'll have to- 2 straw polls in one meeting.
What would
It's-
this board change from that provision of the bylaw? What would you change? I'm sorry that I'm asking this, I'm a little confused with.
What would
would
we
you
ask of
change
the of
from
the
the
board?
bylaws? What is it that you will go to the other committee, I believe, to get input on what?
Right.
Well, I think, are we going in the right direction at all is the,
Well, you
But-
already agree upon.
Decided we're not gonna change the
We're
size.
not gonna
which
change
is
the
the only
size,
thing.
which is what most people, either people complain in this town about the neighbors renting the apartment, or the applicants say it is too small. Those are the 2 major complaints. For example, I just had one person downstairs at 6:30, and we print out the bylaws. The bylaws, if you go before the building department, and I don't know if you've seen it, Brian, but you can see the bylaws right there for LLAs. We have the bylaws for,
you put them right on like the pool.
Yeah.
Because it's right.
and most people don't even notice them. And this person came like around 6:30, because he's adding an addition, and then he said, I look for this kind of stuff. When I see people adding more to their house, I always ask questions, what is this, what is that? And he had a 2-bedroom, I believe, on the upper floor with a kitchen. And he didn't know, he said, well, he was very honest. He said, my mother is gonna live here, I'm gonna have more bedrooms downstairs for my family. And then I told him, well, this looks like an LLA.
This is the process.
Yes. He called it himself an in-law apartment, but he didn't know how to go about it. I got the bylaws, I gave it to him, I opened 750 square feet, I told him the design, how it works. He was very excited to know, because he's gonna come back to Becky tomorrow morning
And follow the
and
process.
submit for a hearing with the board. But I think that, whether, and this is my personal opinion, I hope I'm not putting too much into, I know that you guys are gonna probably make the decision, but whether you increase to 900 or 750, the people that wants to do the right thing, they're gonna do the right thing. And the people who are gonna do the wrong thing, no matter what, they're just gonna do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
They're gonna rent it if they wanna rent it, and they probably know that it's wrong, but, they say, well, I didn't know. But
Right.
I guess what's the point of the committee?
Yeah.
So our objectives, as they're listed, one, to allow the provision of a limited accessory apartment within the existing, as of the date of application, single-family dwelling unit for extended family members of the owner. We feel pretty strongly that's correct. We're not looking to have people that are not family members do this. Two is to assure that the single-family character of the neighborhood will be maintained. I honestly think we're kind of lax in this a little, and we could do better in looking at it, saying, does it look like a two-family? And we should try to work towards correcting that. A door is not to be on the front, it should be on the side, it shouldn't look like a two-family.
I think,
That's what we're charged with. I don't think we do it that well. I don't think we're strict about it.
in relation to the first one
I
that
think we do
you,
pretty good.
in relation to the first one you said, we're totally lax in following up and making sure that stays that way.
Well, it falls out of our purview. I think the town has the responsibility.
Well, I'm talking from the standpoint of the town.
So, I mean, that's an improvement that could be made. I don't know.
I'm sorry, what was Glenn's comment?
Making sure it stays to,
He's suggesting that, so you have to renew your application every 2 years,
Not here, not,
or annually?
not for the LLA?
Yeah.
Only, so that provision there, only if they sell, they have to,
If a
they have
sale.
to
They're supposed to contact us within 30 days.
contact the building
isn't it?
commissioner. I think that one is,
It's under the use restriction.
upon sale of the property, the new owner has
give
to
you those,
file
yeah.
30 days of receipt, or if the dwelling remains
Section
single-family,
E.
the LL is discontinued.
Number 4.
The LLA is discontinued, the space remains.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can we agree to call it an
Direct-
LAA moving forward? It's really killing me to hear LLA.
Do I keep saying LLA?
Yes. Half the board says LLA.
in
Five letters in
Verreca,
a row, I get confused.
Killing me.
one other thing I noticed in Verreca is that they do an
Get me out
annual,
of this meeting, that's the one.
An annual letter?
I believe they have to submit yearly a letter
Owners
of
do?
yeah.
Oh, verification that it's still.
Oh,
Verification that-
interesting.
Yearly.
Yearly, huh?
What happens if you don't get it?
I think you
Keep a
guys,
database.
Jose comes in with guns blazing.
Right.
I close
I don't
my,
even know who
My
follows
pad,
up. I don't know who does that.
I mean, if there's not like a
Your task
fine
list
or
there,
anything,
Becky.
then-
So, Jose,
another-
would that be similar to other types of permits the building department,
Yeah.
like,
it's
sends
just,
out the
an-
application, it
yeah.
gets sent back?
it is something else to keep up with,
Right.
because if people don't do it, now you have 10, 15 LLAs in town that are not providing.
Oh, how many do you know we have? Do you know? Hundreds.
We have plenty of them, yeah.
Yeah.
can we just give it to the dog permit people and make them follow up? Because they send me stuff every year,
You
and
get hit hard with that one, don't you?
and they tell me I'll pay more if I don't get it back to them by a certain
true.
date,
Send,
so.
send the notice in with the water bill.
You
And that's
just
the
add
thought,
another
is to make
person
that
to
a
the town's
fee-based
payroll.
thing. And then it could be enforced and paid for as well.
Yeah, do,
Idea.
$25 a year or something, or I don't know what it is, you know.
Right, but it-
Register
yeah,
your
to register your
LAA, I'm sorry, LAA.
She did it, she did it.
LAA.
She caught herself, though, you gotta
I
give
caught
her.
it.
And to that provision there, number 6, that says
drop an
that,
egg, doesn't matter. Sorry. So that's a consideration. We could look at a fee-based thing that, would one, pay for the enforcement, and two, I guess, he's not loving it. But I mean, is it your department that is charged with following, I don't know who's,
it will be because it's charging the building building
Did Becky-
inspector.
What's the,
That
you
was-
can make,
on Saturday?
you can make every rule you want, but the question is, what's the penalty?
Right.
I lie.
So,
Oh, well.
because now it becomes, like, for example, I went to, somebody called
I don't
because,
know.
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, you didn't, I don't think.
But I went to complain about this person renting an LLA, and, I knock on the door, and the person told me that it wasn't an LLA. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was approved as an LLA years prior. And so I went there because apparently the person was renting it to non-relatives. And they, I knock on the door, I identify myself, and I just couldn't, it's hard to prove. Because, for example, number 5 there, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yeah, but in general, I think it's hard to prove when somebody, because you get into all kinds of legal stuff.
Right, right. No, I think I understand how hard it is to do.
I could say here.
Just
I'm-
trying to
I'm
figure
his-
out how
I'm his
to-
sister. You come in,
Oh,
they're my-
sis.
they're my-
Yeah.
He's my brother, I'm his
my-
family,
And how can you
right?
disqualify?
And how do you document that?
Right, prove
Yeah,
it,
right.
or disprove it.
What I meant to say was that if you see number 6,
Under,
in which it says that the building unit remains a single family and the LLA cannot be rented to persons who are not extended family members, but then when you go to the definition of extended family members, they can claim that anybody is an extended family member. So you,
Or a person providing nursing
Yeah.
or, yeah.
And again, what's the penalty? A
Zero.
line.
and
As far as
that's,
I know there.
Well, you have
I
to
don't- is there an
create
actual
something,
fine?
right? It's like,
no, I mean, I think it's to the discretion of the building.
It could be like any
Sure.
violation, which is
But it will be like
$100 a
any
day.
I mean,
So-
you, if someone breaks any housing rule or something, if I start parking tractor trailers in my front yard, there's got to be something to make me stop if I just don't want to stop on my own, whether, you levy a fine and you.
Right.
So something, when the fines keep building up and you put it into collections or the sheriff comes, I don't know, but you got to make it uncomfortable for people to continue to, otherwise, yeah, to your point,
If you go to number 2, I think it answered the question right there.
what is the answer?
H number 2,
OH.
H2?
yeah,
Oh.
if a complaint is filed with the building.
Monitoring, inspection, enforcements. Oh.
In accordance
two.
with the sale of the property.
If a complaint is filed, the inspector shall inspect, purpose zoning
Oh.
filed 30 days, failure to
They're not gonna
apply for a
care.
permit 30 days,
They're just gonna keep doing it.
being renewal of said lapse discontinued, violations of the provision of the viable permit by grant may be subject to a fine.
Is there anything that you would subject a fine for now? Like anything that a homeowner could do that you would assess a fine or a fee for?
Yeah, happens all the time.
And then what do you, what's the follow-up for that? What do
Well,
you,
the thing I do, I have never issued a fine. I do send a letter right away telling them, hey, listen, I received this complaint, and
Failure to rectify.
right. We had an example, one that was here that, they came right away. Most people respond right away and they try to rectify the situation. If I don't hear from the person, like I usually do two notices, and then the third is not a notice, is basically a fine.
and if they don't pay?
And that's another thing, then I refer it to
Maybe
town
that's the
council.
property.
Town council will advise me how to proceed, like if court action is to be taken or,
Yeah, so if there's an avenue for enforcement, then like the way that we do any other fine, then you put this in that avenue, and when the fines add up to some threshold, you,
Because it looks like it's already here. It looks like they already have that process, because it says, right?
yeah, because like when I was in the Treasure of a Condo Association, it was like, yeah, once you get past a certain fee, we're taking you to court, and by the way, you're gonna pay the lawyer's fees, so it's not gonna cost us anything. Like, if you stack it up like that, I think people doing this
That's
rental will have
clearly
some.
written into the rules and regulations.
But, I mean, I believe it
Yeah.
is.
It's in the bylaw already.
What happens after the fact? If you violate, if you don't respond, this is the course of action.
Yeah, so I think those are the changes that we would want to put in. I mean, for me, the changes I would want to consider is, number one, how do we make it more enforceable so that it's easier for us to look and go, this is an LAA, this is not an LAA. You are trying to slide this in under that and it doesn't work. And then how do we enforce all the after, because everything that we're considering, the first place my mind goes is, how is some builder or developer or whatever going to try to use this as a loophole to do something that they want to do that we don't want them to do? Like, I'm a builder, I have a brother, he's gonna move into the LAA, and we're gonna rent it that way, and 6 months later, we're both gonna move out, and I have a house and something to rent. Repeat, because I'm a builder, I can do that, and I have a brother, and I can sign all the papers, and if you guys let me get away with it. So, how do we architect it so that we serve the people we're trying to serve and stop others from taking advantage?
That's out there on one of the branches. that
Probably an
you're trying to-
application, it would be an application. So you'd fill out an application for LLA like we do, and then like low-income housing, every year it has to be renewed. So why couldn't we do something like that in an application form?
There was a presentation made to the planning board about when the planning board puts in some stipulation after the fact toward the end of the discussion. Does anybody ever follow up that they actually did that? And basically the answer came back, nobody. It's the same thing. There's not enough people to follow up these things. You just assume.
But that's what I think, if you have a fee-based structure, where if you want an LAA, I'm gonna tell you, it's gonna be $100 a year to like home security alarm permits. They charge me $30 a year, 15. I want my alarms, and I pay it, because I don't think there's another option. I could rip out the alarm, but if I want the LAA, and they say, every year by March 1st, you have to send this in with the, ID
Who's living
photo
in the
of everyone who's
home,
living there, and your statement about how they're related to you. That's my mom, my great aunt, whatever. So I'm gonna have all these things digitally on file, so that when Jose shows up and somebody not them is there, we can,
They get a letter annually.
are you one of these two people on this form?
That's a good idea.
No,
That's a good
I'm
point.
Do you
Uncle
have
Joe.
a-
Well, you're an
have
uncle,
a
but you're not on this
database
form,
of
so,
all the
Verifying
LA
relations.
towns
yeah.
That you could send out a letter to all of
wouldn't say
them,
$100,
saying
that's
that
kinda
you're gonna
steep.
have to respond every year.
Once
and
a
you're
year?
gonna have to
you could probably do an in-house research to
single parent,
see
3 kids?
which ones have been.
If you're just spending $200,000 to build this
and then
LAA, I
Send the
mean,
letter
It
based
came
on
with the
what we
house.
find. But I personally don't
But they're
keep.
gonna stay.
And I'm supporting my single-
That's a true story. The LLA isn't going away when people
It came
make
with
a
the house,
sale
and I'm
or-
supporting my single.
Well,
my-
I mean-
my
yeah, but if
fixed
you're not
income
using it
mother.
as an LAA, then you,
I'm supporting my fixed
you don't
income
have to
mother
pay
that
this
came
fee.
with me.
I buy a house that was an LAA, and, I don't have a need for that. I can blow through that opening and turn that into living space for my family,
Just
right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-
that's not even a
Yeah.
consideration.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine.
so I think my thing is, when you're using it as an LAA, you pay this fee, and that supports all the enforcement and stuff that we're talking about. We need to figure out a way to do it. So we make however many thousands of dollars a year, and that pays for the
Well,
follow-up.
You're talking about creating it as an enterprise fund, so that it pays for itself.
Yes. I mean-
Like a dog license.
Well, if you need to police it, right, you need to have something to fund it.
Right.
Yeah, so that
Another
way,
town employee, what we need.
No.
we solved the problem of having things go unchecked and abused forever, which I think is a problem for the town, because he gets a lot of calls with people going, I have this situation, and there's no one to follow up on it, and no good trail so that his team can follow up on it, because it's like, well, who's here? Oh, I'm his uncle. Oh, okay, thank you, uncle, and you leave. But if there's documentation and some sort of,
Proof of relations.
yeah, so then you can't really say, I don't know, because you just checked, this is my uncle. It has to be a this kind of relative, and I'm saying, yep, that's my uncle, and only him and his three-legged dog Joe are living there, and, you know.
Probably three-legged.
That's a good idea.
I mean, I think that's the first thing I could think of for how we could have some sort of enforcement, which I think is a big dissuasion to people for just
Post,
do whatever I want. Yeah.
yeah, post permitting, post everything, people are living there.
Yeah.
I think the annual thing is actually a very good idea. I think
think
it
it
would
is,
work
yeah.
well. And if they don't
I agree.
respond, well, that's, you know,
They want their family, you're gonna pay the $100 and fill out the form, right? I mean, it's, whatever.
up to 100 now.
Can we at least call it
25 or what, well, Steve said 100, I'm
25?
going with
No.
Steve.
Let's do 25.
We're gonna need cash.
I mean, I think you got to do the math and figure out how many LAAs are out there, and if there's, you know,
Yeah.
6 of them, and you're going to do $25 a
I just
piece, then we're
asked
not
him.
going to get anywhere.
You,
but-
can you,
Why?
is there a list of all these LLAs? And he just said no.
We don't,
No,
The database
I
needs
do
to be
not keep a
updated.
list.
no.
I personally don't keep up a list, but maybe we can do,
In recent years with the digital files, we can do a search for all of them
Search,
in
right.
the community developments network file
How
system.
many years back?
Well, I guess until 2001, when this was adopted. But in terms
Before
of
then, they
actually
weren't legal,
going
so they
through
don't
the
exist.
actual files and pulling them
They
out,
could have
some
existed
of it will be
without.
physical work,
They're not an
so.
LAA if there wasn't before 2000. There
It
could
there
have
can
been
be
structures
illegal
there.
apartments there,
You're still saying
but
LLA.
an
then it was-
LAA only existed once it was created. So maybe we should make a list, see how many there are, and see about doing a form letter. I mean,
Every year in, I don't know when it started, but in the handful of recent years, in the annual town report, our department lists down how many permits this board issued every year. How many LAAs, how many special permits, how
I've
many
seen that.
variances, how many administrative appeals, so we can go back, tally them up.
So if
But then it's a
we,
matter of
dec-
searching for them and actually creating
we-
a usable database to answer your question.
if we decide
exist.
that there should be a structure and fines and so forth, is that something that has to be approved by town meeting?
we don't have the purview to do any
I know,
of this.
who-
It's-
who
we're-
does?
We're trying to solve a problem, but I think
It's already-
Jose would administer
there.
that.
It's already here.
Building inspector.
Subject to a fine in accordance with 195-100 of this bylaw.
$300
But who,
Jose is.
$300 a day per violation, so.
Well, the registration's not part of it.
Oh,
We have to make it so
Yeah.
that he can
Enforce it.
enforce this, because right now, there's a rule that there's no basis for
That would
enforcement.
probably talk to Paul about,
I
but
think
it might be a
Steve's
town
idea
meeting
is,
thing.
it's very logical, his idea, because if we establish something just like Bereka, to every year, people have to come in and
Yeah.
file for an inspection, just like a COI or something like that,
do you have the time to do all that follow-up?
we'll get somebody else.
Well, that's just,
No, that's
you
what the
also
fee
need
is
the
for,
staff,
right?
but
If
you also
you-
need the staffing to be able to
looking for a
carry
new
through
job.
with all that.
Another hire for the town.
Right?
If it solves a problem, then
Yeah.
that's the goal. I
1.3
mean,
employees.
I don't necessarily want to hire another police officer, but if it solves a problem and cuts down on, then that's,
Right.
Money well
Give and
spent.
take, yeah.
All right, well, I think that I'm going to write a letter to Paul Haverty, ask him to explain how the fines would work, but I think it basically will leave us. We're
But the-
beyond our ability here, but I think that Jose would be,
The fines are, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, the fines are already there.
well, I'd like to find a way to incorporate a fee structure to make sure that people do register their LAAs every year.
I think he used the wrong word.
Oh, okay.
Fee for registration, I think is
Right.
what you're
A
asking for, not a
like
fine.
Like an inspection, re-inspection fee, okay.
Maybe
yeah.
doing
The
it,
fine is there if they don't do it, but if we have record of them on an annual basis.
maybe initiating or
Or
incorporating an
registration.
annual,
And I actually thought there was
Generational.
some
He would also be able to
mechanism there
rule
that you
on whether you
were
can legally do
supposed
it.
to.
relation ownership, relation registration.
Once you sell it. 30 days when the new seller comes in, the way the bylaw is written, that when you purchase a home that has one,
Right.
the bylaw gives you 30 days to contact the board to reapply, in a sense, basically keep it going.
You're buying an
You're
LLA
buying
with it, and now
yes,
you're gonna
yeah. And I've gotten a couple of phone calls over the past year, and one of them, once I explained the process to them, they actually didn't want the LAA. They wanted all the square footage to themselves, so they were planning on opening it up.
which is perfectly legal.
So in that case, that one has now gone null and void, right? So even though it might still be in our file cabinet as being an existing LAA, that's one of those cases where if we were able to come up with this database, send out letters to everyone, we can find out how many are still in existence and how many aren't from when they were initially permitted.
What are they
Not all of them are.
Right.
So,
Discontinued.
right, discontinued.
I think if you send me something that tells me I have 60 days to get back to you, or you're going to charge me $100 for an
Right.
LAA I don't have,
Right, right.
I'm going to send it back and say, I don't have this, so leave me alone. And then if you figure out people are living there that, aren't my kids, then, yeah, I've perjured myself, basically.
Right.
But, I think it's an option. I mean, there might be a better one, but, I think it gives Jose the opportunity to have the data to take some action. And I think that serves a need in the town because he keeps getting these calls and doesn't really have a way to do much about it right now.
So the mechanism is in place. When you fill out the application, aren't you required to identify the person that's going to be living there?
The application itself, no. The bylaw states that you're supposed to identify who. So I always ask everyone who's applying to give us a narrative stating who they are, their names and their relation. So that's what we've been getting. And that gets put into the file.
And so that could be an annual
So
letter
it's
without
not,
too much problem.
not on the actual application.
That's kind of weird, it's not, considering they have to be identified. Maybe updating the application.
Yeah.
might
Maybe
be
we
needed
update the
too.
forms, yeah.
And that could be the beginning of your forms.
And then you have to also consider, okay, well, what if that changes? What is the mechanism for those folks to then contact us to update, or even to remind them, would be the
Yeah.
annual registration, who's living in it now?
Right.
Because once they get it, they're not going to think about, oh, I've changed it, it's
I
now,
think
you
you need
know.
to physically, like a bill or the dog license.
So do they have, when we make our decisions, they gotta come to you to get something in writing, correct?
They go to the town clerk. So the decision is written up, the document's written up, Brian signs it. I then go submit it to the town clerk, it gets stamped in, and they keep it. We have 3 copies signed. I keep 1 in our file, in case no one ever recorded it, we still have an original. And then 2 get submitted to town clerk, 1 stays in the town clerk's
One goes to
record,
them.
right, and then 1 goes back to them once it's certified. So after the appeal period is over, the last page of any decision is where the town clerk certifies that no one appealed it. And then once that's signed and notarized, they go record at the registry of deeds.
I'm just wondering if there's a way to attach or include with the LAAs, or, hey, you have to register change of tenants, or people who, and you have to renew your registration every year as part of.
That's something we have to put into the forms.
It's really no different than, for example, in the condo development, every year you have to fill out an application with changes. Like if you have a different car, they need to know that because they're looking for cars that don't belong there. Or the town sends out their annual questionnaire
Yep.
about the residents who's living here and so
Right,
forth. Same thing.
census.
Right, and you sign it
Right.
stating that what you're saying is true. It's kind of that same idea. Most people do the right thing, right?
Right.
So,
So I guess to be continued until December, but if
Okay.
you could look at the application and see if you could find a way to incorporate these ideas both into the application and maybe think about how, maybe you can talk with Jose, how to get to the point where we do request an annual report from each LAA to,
It's worth coming just for that.
to continue on with it. So that's, that'll be the plan.
all right, so this is a discussion, so you don't have to vote to continue, but I'll go ahead and put it on the next agenda. So we pick up where
Okay.
we left off, is that right? Or do you want to vote to continue the discussion? It's up to you.
Well, I think the changes you make would be reviewed, so we could continue that.
Okay.
Too much trouble. We had some minutes to approve, but I could not open them.
Before we go to minutes, could,
Oh,
it's
sorry.
not on the agenda, but we actually have new business number 2 item, which was that other sheet that. you
Oh,
had.
that other sheet, yeah, I don't
Other
like that
sheet
other
We just
sheet.
received today.
All right, so we received a letter today.
I don't like that look you just had.
Saddens my heart.
Mine too.
Hi, Becky. Please allow this email to serve as my resignation from the Zoning Board of Appeals after the 11/2/23 meeting. Please let me know what else you will need from me. Thank you, Nancy Morency.
What?
Personally, thank you for all your work. I wish you the best. I'm
Yeah,
gonna miss you very much.
I'll miss everyone.
Why?
Great. I'll fill you in later.
Off camera.
Moving on to bigger and better things, I see. It's
Kind
okay.
of.
Well, the best of luck at the future. We've really enjoyed having you on the board, that's
Thank
for
you.
sure.
Thank you for imparting all your wisdom to me.
How many years have you been on?
I don't even know. It's been a while.
At least 4.
Yeah.
Oh, more money.
I don't know who's gonna read my minutes from now on.
I know. All right. Next
Can you
minute
still-
major.
would you mind terribly just doing the
She
minutes?
she was our English person, man. We're gonna be in trouble.
Did you read the minutes
Well,
for this one?
Becky, I don't have to do much with Becky, so.
I tried both of the drafts, 6/1/23 and 7/6/23, and could not get them open.
Really?
I got those
The
open.
only
You have
one.
both of them? Oh, you
I
have those?
responded to,
Yeah.
well, I sent you an email on the.
Yes,
the
I just saw
6
that.
One, I didn't,
So, let's see here.
So if it has been reviewed and people want to vote on it,
Nobody
I'm
was saying
fine with it. I
anything.
just didn't get the
So
opportunity.
Steven submitted some edits for me.
like I knew Nancy was leaving.
Okay,
or
June
something.
I know,
1st.
just stepping up.
I don't think I was here for the June. I don't
Well,
think.
now you know who your minute boy is now.
I don't think I was here for the.
Hey, that's
June
minute,
one.
that's Minute Man.
I like, man, boy, that was pretty
You weren't here
good.
for July.
LAA.
Oh,
You
maybe
weren't
it was
here
July.
July.
What month are we in? No. Okay.
In August,
the last
we
memory
did not
we need
meet.
of us
In
on this.
September, you weren't here. June. Okay, so,
What month
are there
we in?
any meeting minutes that
November, September? Okay.
you all feel comfortable approving?
Why is
I'm-
September highlighted?
Why is Oh, because I added on after. So this was a revision to the agenda, so I sent it out
Which I
after
wasn't
the
here
fact.
for,
So
so-
what I've started doing for both boards is whenever there's a revision to the agenda, I actually highlight what
Highlight it
that
so you can find
addition
it.
is, yeah. Because it's usually, it's documents to the topics that have already been posted. But it can be a little tricky, especially with planning board, when they already have so much listed on there. So, I can click on them if you would
I
like.
did June and July. I had trouble getting September open, and I was
Okay,
not here
sorry
for
about that.
October. Well, September opens here, I don't know why it didn't
Yeah.
on my computer.
Sometimes you have to press control and click on it.
Oh, really?
Control button,
I never did that.
yeah. But some,
I
it
didn't even
should,
think to try.
okay, so,
I propose, because I propose we do for June and July and then wait for September and October.
I like it.
Okay,
okay.
sounds like a motion.
I can't motion because I wasn't here for, I was just making a recommendation for the
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for June and July
With
June
your edits?
With edits,
with edits.
okay.
And July as is.
Final act of your
Second.
second, all in favor?
Do you know who was here?
Stephen, Nancy.
What 5 people were here for those meetings?
Let me double check.
If I can get on it here.
So June, Brian, Jamie, Nancy, Stephen, Peter, and Glenn, so yes.
Okay. Was here.
Okay. And then, July were already, July was already approved.
I thought so too.
July is
Yeah.
already approved and posted.
Mhm.
And then
Did
we'll
I
do-
accidentally
how
put the
come it
wrong one
wasn't-
on here? Sorry.
It says
Hold on a
7/6/23.
second.
You didn't have edits to that?
That sounds like July.
Perhaps I'm getting myself confused now.
And July was Brian, Charlie,
It was.
Nancy, Stephen, Jamie, Peter, and
June,
Rodney.
July, all right, sorry about that.
So we do have 5.
So July was already approved?
4.
I believe
no.
that's the case, yeah. I
July was
remember
already
it.
approved. I thought we did last
Mhm.
time. S-
So July was approved, but June
Hold
wasn't?
on. Correct.
Oh, is that the one because
And the
I
reason-
had edits and then we?
Yes, yes, yep.
And then August
They were
was a
held
month
off a little
off,
bit.
so now it's off.
And I
some
had
for
done
whatever.
July because I wasn't actually here for the meeting, and I had decisions I had to write based on what had happened that day, and wanting to get the minutes approved, knowing
Okay.
there could be a potential appeal to a decision.
So we got June done, we
Okay.
got July done, so
All right,
we're
let me
caught up.
just double
I
check
reviewed
here.
July for nothing.
Hold on, let me just, no, they're not posted. So, hold on, we still have to vote on July, they are not posted, and the reason being is because the edits went back and forth for a couple of
Okay.
months. So now, yes, so
We
you
did
do
vote for
have to
July.
vote on July.
We already did, right? Just
Well,
now.
technically we did, then we said.
Right now you did, so we're all set. Okay,
we're set.
thank you.
So at our next
everyone
meeting,
voted
we'll
yes.
approve September, October,
Okay,
and November if
yes,
presented.
We got it, Steve?
Motion to adjourn?
all right.
All in favor? All right. Thank you all very much. Specifically-